I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but somebody doubted me on stream the other day. I said that for Starfield, I was like, I don't know how the gun system works in the creation engine anymore, but when they built the gun mechanics back for Fallout 3, they tried to get the bow and arrow system working for the gun system. They basically reworked bow and arrows into the shape of a gun and then tried to make that system work. It didn't work, and then they had to write it from scratch. But it's in this little documentary that they described that. People doubted me. You guys ready for some 2008 production quality?
We wanted to have more than one thing in our pocket.
Young Todd. Young Todd. Wow. Wow. The legend, the man, the myth.
That we didn't just want to do an Elder Scrolls, then an Elder Scrolls, and an Elder Scrolls. We knew we wanted to be in a similar vein in terms of we wanted open world, we wanted, kind of role-playing elements and things like this. And we made a list of things that we might want to do. At the top of the list was Fallout.
Fallout 1 to me is like the pinnacle of the post-apocalyptic gameplay.
So fun fact, Emil Pagliarulo, this guy, he's lost like 250 pounds. He's now like really buff and he still works there. He's like the lead writer on Starfield and Fallout 4 and all that. But he lost a ton of weight. So if you see him now, like I guess we could look it up. This is him now. Good for him, right? Lost a ton of weight. Yeah, this is him. Isn't that crazy? Good for him, right? Huge dubs, yeah. So this is the guy that like wrote the Fus Roda and the all the chants in Skyrim and everything. If you like Bethesda stuff, you probably like it because of this guy. Yeah, look, he's bursting at the seams of the shirt. Yeah, he swung the other way completely. So props to him. But this is him back in the day, back in like 2008, 2009. So he's done a lot. He was active on IGN's message boards back into the 2000s, added people on Xbox Live and shit. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, it's super cool.
And looking at the story and the characters in there were really inspiring.
We felt in that world and the systems they have in Fallout 1, coupled with the way we put things together, we sort of became obsessed. Like, this is the game. We have to make this game.
Yeah, one of the things I'm most worried about Starfield, and I know it's selfish and stupid, there's none of this cinematic kill cam anymore. They haven't shown it off at all, which I can't imagine that's a super heavyweight system to put on, but they cut it out apparently. You never stop being fat on the inside. I know I never have. I still have the same mindset as when I was a super chubby baby. Same thing.
A bunch of the people who run the company knew the people at Interplay. We pestered them like, are you guys using Fallout? They weren't doing anything with it. Can we do something? And eventually they said yes.
It's now ours, and we have always taken the approach that Fallout 3...
Pete Hines with black hair. Now Pete Hines, completely white hair. It's weird. This is a throwback. But here, he was the product manager. Now he's like the head honcho at Bethesda Softworks. So he leveled up. He really climbed the ranks. But it's really interesting to look back at this. And to like see how far each of these people came. You see their titles and like how they're dressed and what they're wearing, how they act. And then you look at them now, a solid like 15 years later, and you see how far they've come, how much they've leveled up in the company that they're at. And it's kind of crazy.
Is being made as if we made the first two. Well, that means we do what we do, which is we reinvent, we look at what works, what didn't. We're not afraid to make changes, we're not afraid to try new things, and we're going to try and sort of move the genre forward and move gaming forward.
Our game is set 30-some years after the events of Fallout 2, so we didn't want to step on their fiction, but the story itself is something that we came up with based on the themes of the original Fallout. It's 30 years after the events of Fallout 2, but it's 200 years after the original atomic holocaust. So in our game, things have actually gotten worse. Society hasn't progressed. Humanity is struggling to survive. There's radiation sickness, and people don't have fresh, clean water, and like people are pretty well screwed. You leave the safety of your vault into this world, it's your big decision. Am I going to help these people, or am I going to, do my own thing and serve my own selfish needs?
We felt we needed to do something new with
That. I'll do that. It is really fun, though I find it genuinely difficult to play like a super selfish, crazy person run and to just play like a psychopath maniac. Like, these are digital characters. I can reload and they'll be fine. But I like actually struggle with it. I always want to be a nice guy.
role-playing in guns, that we couldn't just do a pure first-person shooter thing. So how can we kind of bridge that gap between what my character can do that I've made in the game and what I, the player, can do? Something I always wrestle with.
Our game is primarily first person. So when you have guns in first person, the bar has been raised. You know, you've got Halo 3, Call of Duty 4, you get to approach that level, but it's tough because we're an RPG, not a shooter. What we definitely wanted to do with the gun stuff is not do everything that everyone else has done. So, you know, we have some weapons that you can craft and some unique weapons, you know, like the rocket launcher that shoots all the crap you find in the world. It can shoot it as projectiles. One of the things we realized is with Oblivion, most of the combat is melee combat. So everybody's, you know, charging you in up close and personal. Not so with guns. People stay back, they take cover. We really had to compensate for that.
What we're doing technically with Fallout 3, we're drawing twice as much stuff on the screen and faster, right? So our actual ability to put things on the screen and have them look cool or be cool or do more with characters, explosions, whatever we want, it's, you know, a large factor above Oblivion.
What's funny is, like, at the time, this was cutting edge. And now you look back at it, and Fallout 3 has aged the worst of a lot of games from 2008. Like, it's rough. But at the time, it was like cutting edge tech. It really was.
Our problem is we can't stop ourselves. Fallout's one of those examples of the game, when we started, was about half the size.
I look at the game overall, and it's remarkably similar to, you know, what we had envisioned. There are some really big plot points that changed for the better.
You emerge from these vaults, and you don't know what's happened. So it's the optimism of this retro 50s world, and it's all destroyed. That people are still getting on. They're still trying to do their hair right, and if they had hairspray, they'd use it. It's like, you know what? Don't look at the destroyed crater and the smoking thing behind me. It's all cool, we'll have some cigars and martinis later.
You just managed to get yourself into all sorts of trouble, don't you?
That's what I love about Fallout. It doesn't take itself too seriously because the reality is so frightening and so depressing. It feels like you leave that vault, and the only thing you take with you is this piece of technology strapped to your wrist that becomes your sort of lifeline. It's that immersion thing. It's keeping you in the game.
We're big believers in immersion because ultimately our goal is
I don't believe in immersion. Get rid of it.
we want to see productivity decline. We want sick days to go up. We want people staying up until 5 o'clock in the morning because they had no idea what time it was and they just had to do that one more quest and they have to get up for work in an hour later.
Dude, I miss those games. I haven't had a game like that probably since... I mean, Elden Ring was like that. Elden Ring I spent a lot of time with, but like maybe once a year you get a game where you just can't stop. Like you just have to keep going. One more quest. And it's like a magical thing. It's great when it happens and also horrible. But yeah, there's nothing quite like that feeling of just having that new obsession, you know? Yeah, once a year if we're lucky. Yeah, for real. Cameron, thanks for dropping by, my friend. Appreciate you.
I think one of the things that we try to do really well are the worlds that are very, very realized. So for the moments you're in them, the amount of times you say, I wonder if I can... Oh, I can.
That sound designer, still at Bethesda as well, as far as I know. Also the head lead designer of audio on Skyrim and I believe Fallout 4 as well.
I wonder if I can. Oh, I can. It gives you a level of attachment, you know, to the person you're playing in the
We're
game.
making the
Fallout
smokestack.
is just such a unique, wonderful world to explore. I think it fits the kind of games we make perfectly. It's an open-ended environment, lots of characters, really interesting game systems.
If you can make whatever the repetitive action is really entertaining, like that's where the rubber meets the road in a lot of these games. So this is something I know the player's going to do 1,000 times. Make that as entertaining as you can, and the rest of it is pretty much great.
we had the story written and we had the outlines for all the quests, but then, we have a lot of talented designers here. We wanted to pass that stuff on to them, so they would be given the rough outlines of these, miscellaneous quests, and then they would have the freedom to flesh those out themselves.
Ah, welcome, weary traveler. You look like a traveler in need of relaxation and the finest of chemical assistance.
Design is an iterative process. You need to leave room to change as you go. So having a design doc that thick at the outset is actually not that healthy. I think we did a much better job this time around than we did in Oblivion. We had builds of the game, and we actually themed those builds according to the things we wanted to see in the game. So we had a combat build, a creature build.
We had a build that was just called Guns. And all the build was about
This right here.
was shooting guns. Like, how do they feel in your hand? And so there was no, it must do this, it must do this, it must do this. It's just about guns. And that kind of will get us on a path of something that is just a lot more fun.
Never mind,
We can sit
not
in a
that.
meeting for hours and debate, the pluses and minuses of it. And then we'll put it in the game, and in 30 seconds, anybody watching this would go, this is terrible. Or, great. And you don't have to, sometimes you just overthink it. So we try to force ourselves more to put it in the game and play with it as soon as possible. And you just know instantly.
There have certainly been first-person RPGs that have had guns before, but I think it's been a while since PC players have had a game like that. On the console side, I think people have been wanting something like that for a long time, Give me a game that has the gunplay of Gears of War or Call of Duty with the depth of an open-world RPG.
It's hilarious to hear them compare Fallout 3's combat to Call of Duty. Like, even in 2008. That's a bold statement. Like, oh, baby, that's bold.
RPG.
And I hope that eventually, someday, maybe many years from now, that we are just as well known for Fallout as the Elder Scrolls, because
I find that a really cool thing. Like, they said all the way back then, one day we want to be as well known for Fallout as for the Elder Scrolls. And you see the hype around Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, and they definitely achieved that. They really did. So props to them. I mean, it sounded crazy back then, but they pulled it off. So props.
right now they are both our children.
It is so different. It's this weird, like, Tomorrowland gone awry. And that in itself is gold for someone like me to come in and try to, help create that world. So it's pure escapist entertainment. It's crazy. And you try not to get wrapped up on the seriousness of it.
There are moments where you think about it and you wonder if you're being irresponsible. The good news is the people the game is for get it. But sometimes you talk to people, I'm the worst person at a cocktail party. I mean, you go and they say, oh, what do you do? It's like, I make video games. What kind? The kind where you shoot people? Yeah, kind of. Are they really violent? Like, where's it set? In DC? Oh, that's cute. Yeah, it's all blown up. And then they just turn around. They don't want to talk to you anymore. Like, that guy's sick.
It's the signature of a Bethesda game studio game is you're going to have a big open-ended world. You're going to be able to walk anywhere you want. If you see something in the distance, you're going to be able to walk to it, and you're going to be able to open it up, and you're going to find lots of cool stuff there.
We've gotten better with our animation stuff, is leagues above what it was in Oblivion.
That says a lot that they're saying Fallout 3's animation stuff is way better than it was before. Like, oh man. It's really, I find this stuff so cool to go back and be like, at the time in 2008, this game represented huge leaps in tech. And it's weird to think of, but like, Bethesda Game Studios was at one point considered like an industry leader in tech. Like, we look at Rockstar and we're like, oh, their tech is amazing. It looks so photorealistic, and the movement animation systems, the dynamic stuff is so cool. There was a time when Bethesda was like that. They just, after Skyrim, like, they fell behind real quick when it came to Fallout 4 and then Fallout 76. And so, like, for 10 years, their tech has not really progressed. Maybe Starfield will be the first step back. I don't know. But we'll see. If Fallout has Call of Duty gun combat, then Skyrim has Dynasty Warriors combat. Basically, I mean, you can see, like, that's the vision. Didn't quite pull it off.
Our portrayal of characters
John?
as realistic people, I think, have gone above and beyond.
It's a big world out there, honey, full of all sorts of people. What about you? What sort of person are you going to be? It's very, very interesting that there's a group of people who have hope for what's left of humanity. It's a very compelling story, and the young hero or heroine has to go through a series of tests, both ethical and moral as well as physical, and I think it's very, very good.
despite the destruction and despite like how depressing some of the scenes may be, they're a pure charm. And some of those are like violence done in ridiculous manner. And some of those are align somebody.
Okay, real quick. Big moment. You ready? We're going to put this in. So we have the smokestack, and then we have the housing for it. And they had me install these little braces. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to put this in, and then these little joints are going to click into these, and I'm going to push those in, and it's going to lock in place, okay? So red, matching with red. Slides down. Make sure we're not skipping any steps. And then squeeze, squeeze, and it's in place. Look at that. That's sexy. That's beautiful. Wow. Okay. Anyway, sorry to get distracted.
He says.
Moriarty pisses in his still. Crazy bastard thinks it's hilarious.
There are very few ideas that you can't put into a Fallout game. You know, something else that's more serious fantasy, you'd say, nah, wrong flavor. But here, you know, you can have a robot that goes around asking for friends and cutting their heads off, or, you know, anything you want to do. Being private and publishing our own stuff lets us take risks that a lot of people can't. We're in a pretty fortunate position of having the time and the creative freedom to do games like this. We sort of feel like we like it a lot, and if we execute it well, it'll find an audience that it makes us enough money to do the next game.
You have a smaller group of people, they tend to cling to each other a little more tightly. We tend to believe in each other a little more. You know, sort of the idea that it's us against the world. No other help is coming. If we're going to get it done, it's going to be the folks here. And when I started in '99, it was a little group of folks. You know, the development team was 10, 12 guys. It was Todd and his small little band working away on Morrowind then. Even though we've grown and gotten a lot bigger, I don't think we've lost that feeling. I think that there are enough of us from those days, and just about everybody from that first team is still here.
Someone was playing and did the Megaton quest, and it was priceless. He just hit the switch, and you see the mushroom cloud in the background. He just sort of sat back in his chair, and with this big smile on his face. And then he checked his Pip-Boy to check his karma. It said evil. He said, yep, that'll do it.
That's a pretty big element in the game. When you do something evil, we've tried to make it very visually entertaining, and then the game tells you, you've lost karma, you're a bad person.
Yeah, the 360p era, oh baby.
That was a lot of the reason we wanted to make it. That it was, oh, this is just so cool. And the pushback that I would get, that's like 10 years old. Like, cool is cool forever, man. This is gonna be cool 50 years from now.
In terms of art design, Fallout 3, we had several goals. One of them was to be true to the original games and to sort of, you know, look at those as inspiration, but at the same time updated to various standards as far as the technology goes, and also just kind of inject a lot more realism and detail that you expect in a primarily first-person game. But as far as the aesthetics go, it definitely was a challenge in terms of creating a huge, destroyed, devastated world that was still pretty, fun to explore, and felt like the DC area.
I try to draw what I see in my head, and the part that I see the clearest I tend to draw first. So I try to make things very story-driven, and that'll help me when I'm really, really stumped. I'll say, all right, what do I see in my head? And all right, if we got Wart Cleaver and he's kind of scared, but you know, he found some whiskey and a shotgun. All right, you know, things start to coagulate, and I think a lot of times these characters and situations are really, for me, they're found. And I feel like I'm documenting something that I found, and if it's unclear, it's because, well, I haven't quite found it yet.
In terms of the art specifically, you know, we were kind of given a lot of liberty to sort of decide how we want to reinterpret the game, because there's really so much you can do. You know, jumping up from 64 by 64.
This is it. Then a third of it's done.
To full screen thing. So a lot of it was just based on instinct in terms of the artist, and you know, if we're going to redesign a certain character, if we were going to like take Mr. Handy and what's the new Mr. Haney going to look like? It's like, we wanted a connection there, but at the same time, we wanted to do something new and take it in a new direction, give it a new spin, just to make it feel a little more fresh.
I have an interest in all things 50s because I think there's a certain charisma with the music, with the automobiles, with the clothing style, the sort of jet set Frank Sinatra Rat Pack in a flying car with a martini in one hand and he's going to a big band concert. There's something that's always fun about that. And so designing any of these characters and then throwing them into the wasteland, the dark humor kicked in for me when I imagined Ward Cleaver being pushed out of his bunker, and now he's in the wasteland and he's looking for fresh tobacco for his pipe, and here comes a raider over the top of the horizon. What better kind of thing to draw do you have? I mean, that's a comic book in itself.
In the game design, there's an underlying tone of humor which is appropriate for the franchise, for Fallout. It's definitely a staple of it. How we reflect that in the artwork is more subtle, but there are little things that, for example, we were trying to come up with a list of, all right, what sort of objects and clutter items can we use in our urban landscape in DC, just to fill it up, to clutter it up. And our concept artist, Adam, came up with, he did a sketch of like a coin-operated Fallout shelter.
Do you guys remember these? The coin-operated Fallout shelters that you can go into and find in the world? It's like 25 cents and you'll be saved from the end of the world, but you find bodies inside because they survived the initial blast, but then they starved to death inside the can. It's always super, super funny to me. I love it.
It's just like a little steel tube that if you put 50 cents in, go in, close yourself in, you're in a little one-person Fallout shelter in case the bombs happen to drop when you're out shopping and in downtown or something like that. And it's a ridiculous idea, but it's thematically very appropriate for sort of like the culture of the time period, the 1950s kind of naivete that we were trying to achieve. The world is more focused in that it's a very specific area, sort of DC and sort of the surrounding suburbs. It's a large-scale map, and it's a pretty huge world, but it's very tight in that it's basically one region. It's very cohesive.
I was thinking of setting it on the West Coast. Emil really pushed, we should do it out here. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if that has the right Fallout feel, But the more we thought about it, it was, oh yeah, we got to. Who can blow up Washington, D.C. better than us?
If you look at the Fallout universe, it was necessary to make a split. To take the series where we wanted to go with it, you wanted to get away from the West Coast. You want to get away from the playground that we knew in 1 and 2. So we came all the way over here. It's what we know. And then there's just a lot of great symbolism in having D.C. in a post-nuclear landscape. There's lots of great architecture that we all know and love from the area. So it was just a natural fit, I think.
I spend a lot of my time on weekends going through DC with a digital camera. And when you're going around the White House taking pictures of manhole covers, people want to know why.
This was still at the time when people had to specify, oh, I have a digital camera. It wasn't even that, like at the time when they had the, you were starting to see cell phones super actively taking pictures there. It's like, no, I took this on my cellular camera or my cellular phone, and then I took these pictures on my digital camera. Always found it funny. A bunch of people have been saying that Todd looks like Ted Bundy. I guess I can kind of get it. He's always had like kind of a skinnier face. I don't know why he does that. See that? Drives me crazy. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people say that. I'm sure he loves that. Sure, he's very excited that people think he looks like Ted Bundy.
You're taking pictures of manhole covers around the White House. And I always thought to myself, well, my answer would be very simple. I'm just imagining what this would all look like if it was blown up.
We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how the wasteland around here would actually look. And going and visiting buildings they had knocked down in DC. They knocked down a few buildings, and we would go and click. Just to see what destruction down there would look like.
For me, a lot of times when you design the architecture, and especially in a sci-fi sense, and then you walk down that street, there's a lot of material for you to play with. Looking at a lot of buildings, I would walk in Adams Morgan and I'd see a cluster of houses and I'd say, wow, that's amazing. All right, we put a lot of chrome flanges on them, but just the configurations of things would give you ideas, and one would bounce off of the other, so it was a continuous process.
we were able to really stick to the modern vision of DC with just these quirks, this Art Deco stuff that never existed in our world that would have existed in their world if we extrapolate on what these people and their core values were important to them. So the Googie architecture and stuff like that, that all appears. It's there on the sides of the buildings, and it's sort of tacked on. So you'll see an ancient neoclassical building that's got metal barricading just sheeted onto the side of it in case of a nuclear strike, like profiteering, third-party companies putting the coin-operated vault shelters on the side of the street so you can put a quarter in case there's a blast and hide in there. Just lots of neat little things like that we try to do.
The landmarks we use and the flavor of it, if you're from around here, there's enough of it where you get it, but not so much that it's any sort of handicap to someone who isn't. And the fact that we kind of had an alternate history helped a lot. So because the Fallout universe splits around 1950, we could take great liberties with DC. So we have all these books in Washington, DC, so that the things that were pre the time when we split, we're careful about after that. If a certain thing was built after that, we try actually not even to have it. Or we'll build it in a different way, in a way that we think suits the game better, and our excuse can be, well, in our timeline, they built it different.
All the majors are there, right?
Isn't that a great built-in excuse? Our timeline is different. That's why it's not anywhere near like that. That's why. It's great. It's built in. A virtuous serial killer who never wanted to hurt real life people, so became a game designer so he could do horrible things in the game instead. It's not a bad outlet, that I guess would be virtuous. Or like the Dexter thing, where he's a serial killer, but he doesn't want to hurt people, so he kills serial killers and like criminals and people who deserve to die instead, and that's his outlet. I like how we're creating this whole alternative lore around Todd Howard being like a serial killer just because like he has kind of a skinny face and that's it. Poor guy.
We've got the Jefferson, plays a big part, the Washington, the Lincoln, the Capitol, the White House. More contemporary stuff like the Air Force Memorial obviously wouldn't be there in their world. But we do try and capture inspirations of some things.
We have so much fun doing this. It's almost a guilty pleasure for us. It really is the best job in the world. So it's like you feel kind of guilty in the game or like in the Capitol building fighting super mutants and like, body parts are blowing up. And it's just a big joke. You know what I mean? It's pure escapist entertainment. It's crazy, and you try not to get wrapped up on the seriousness of it.
It's a massive world, and there's a lot of small elements that have to be individually created, which will all come together at some point to sort of finish off the spaces, all the cluttering, all the architecture, all the environments, the lighting, the effects. There are so many elements, and that, a lot of it is just kind of, guessing, okay, whoops. That was a big one.
A major storm swept through the area. There were 4 separate reports of tornadoes across the region.
Tornadoes in the middle of filming the documentary on it. That's funny. This is why you don't get review codes from Bethesda. Yeah, probably. Todd's like, you can't encourage him. Stop it. I know. Well, recently I got this team out of LA that's been working wonders. I mean, they really are fantastic. And they have started helping me get a hold of people for review codes and stuff. Figuring out who we need to get in contact with, stuff like that. They've been very, very helpful. And they have connections direct to Bethesda, and they have the email addresses you need and the phone numbers. So I've been having them kind of covertly get in contact with these studios that might have put me on some list somewhere, just so that they, if they're going to try to throw a fit over me getting a review code, it's like, well, no, we played by the rules. We did it by the book. Sorry that you blacklisted me because I said you did something evil, because you did, but whatever. It's weird, man. Like, sometimes you have to play these weird games with people. You have to, not lie, but you have to be a little covert to get access to some of this stuff, and it's weird. I'm sure people like Skill Up never have to bother with it. They just send him codes, but for me at least, I've taken some or made some bold statements about these companies at times, and so they don't love when I'm that direct. It's an oopsie. Gonna get some sleep, my friend. Get some sleep. It's late there. Do you know of YouTube situation? I don't. I know that they screwed up yesterday. They stopped counting views for like Monday. They stopped counting views for like 4 hours. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but that's all I've heard about. If there's more drama, I'd be down to know about it. Wouldn't put it past them. Because let's be real, it's kind of amazing that YouTube has enough crap going on like this. Would you consider looking back at Quantum Break? Yeah, I could be convinced of it. I'm not opposed to that. I think that's fine. It's just, so far, like, it's just a matter of scheduling at the end of the day. Okay, you ready for this one to go on? Or should we wait? I'll wait. I'll put them on at the same time. We'll do that. Because this piece, it's going to go on the other side, but it's basically going to fill in the whole side of the ship. It's that whole thing.
Get back to nav meshing.
You don't need computers. Draw it up. Where are you going?
You hear they just yelled at them to go and get to work nav meshing. That's something like engines now, they just do. They just nav mesh for you. Which is basically where it creates the perimeters for where players can walk and move and stuff. And it used to be a thing that they would always have to do by hand. Now most engines just basically do it based on the level layout that you set up, and they just handle it. But back in the day, like in all of these documentaries about making Fallout 3 and Skyrim and stuff, they had to do it all by hand. So it's kind of a throwback.
Triangles is frame rate.
Yeah, Taco, we reacted to that earlier in the stream. It's pretty cool. It's cool to see.
We had some electric storms pass through and basically down power lines, trees went down. It was pretty insane. We lost power for a good, I would say about 8 to 10 hours. It happened around 3 o'clock yesterday. It's a little weird because usually, you know, when it rains around here, we do lose power for like a brief 2-3 minutes. So, you know, it was kind of like business as usual, but then the power never came back.
At this point, I don't see a lot of changes affecting, like, you know, data side. No one should be waiting on that. And if it's that important, we'll bring it up.
We have a big milestone coming up next week. So that meeting actually was all about how do we get the game ready for this milestone. And, you know, there are people who will stay here as late as they need to and to get stuff done. We've had stuff like this happen before. We've put builds on planes and flown people, you know, to save time. It's amazing the things that you'll do to get things done.
When the power went out the other day, a bunch of us went over to well, let's get out of here, the power's out. So we went over to the supermarket, and the power was out there. But they had enough emergency power to run the cash registers. So they're feel free, you can buy whatever you want, but all of the aisles are dark. So I start walking the aisles, and I you know, do you have like a, you know, Starbucks bottle thing? I need some coffee. So we start wandering the aisles, it's all pitch black, and I'm using my iPhone as like a flashlight, and I said to one of the guys.
Yeah, and this was before those phones had the ability to just turn on the flash as the flashlight. So the only, like, I remember, I don't know if you guys remember this, but there were dedicated apps that you would download onto your iPhone or Android, and all it did, it was like the flashlight app, and then you pressed a button on the screen when you open the app, and then the whole screen would turn white, kind of like on like the Apple Watch. You can turn on flashlight mode, and it just makes the screen bright white. Except that was for your phone. And then the moment that they introduced the ability to just use the flash as the flashlight, it was like, you know, nobody needed that app anymore. But when he says, like, I held my phone up as the flashlight, again, it's 2008. The iPhone was like a new thing. It's just a year or so old. And so, like, they're not kidding. Yeah, they, like, there was no app for that. You know, it's funny. Yeah, damn, I seem old. Yeah, I remember that shit. Damn, I'm old. Something about him just seems so fake. I don't know. To me, I think Todd really just comes down, and to me, he comes off as a nerd who all of a sudden found something he was really good at, and that was video game creation. And he all of a sudden was making some of the biggest games in the world. It's what he's passionate about. And he found fortune through it, and some notoriety and even fame, I think you could argue. And it just happened really quickly, out of nowhere. Like, and the weird thing is, for something like this, like I get recognized in public every once in a while. I don't think I am anywhere near as well known as Todd Howard, but I think it's easier for like a YouTuber or streamer to slowly get that level of popularity or success, because it's a slow grind. It slowly builds and builds and builds. Whereas for Todd, it's like he comes to E3 one year and he is a rock star, and then he goes away into his hole and builds a game for 4 or 5 years. And then, you know, he comes back to E3 and he's even more of a rock star, and everybody knows who he is, and everybody's making YouTube videos about him and all this stuff. And then he goes back into his hole. And so, like, I think it's just exacerbated because it comes in those heavy waves. But as for, like, all of this type of stuff, I think he's just a very gifted salesman. And I think back in 2008 era times, he wasn't as much the salesman as he became in 2011 with Skyrim, where he took the stage and argued why you should buy this game and convinced a lot of people, and the game ended up being really good. And then Fallout 4, same thing, full Rockstar mode. He was the center of attention and he loved it. And then I think once things kind of flipped back around, like I think he's been less and less involved in the day-to-day creation of these games. And that's kind of caused some of the creative focus to be lost. How do you get recognized? Are you the guy with the Todd Howard cutout? Yeah. Almost every time. That's it. Yeah.
I was like, this is how the world ends, man. This is cool. Like, we're in the game. Like, what else should we get? And one guy's like, antibiotics. You know, like, get antibiotics before food. And we're like working it out in the aisle at Safeway just the other day. So yeah, sometimes it creeps in your head. We felt we needed to do something new with role-playing and guns. The original inspiration was, imagine Burnout Crash Mode with body parts. And we talked about it, and Emil came up with the name.
The acronym is sort of an homage to the FEV V.A.T.S in Fallout 1. It's, you know, where the super mutants got created from. We were sort of looking for an homage, and that's just sort of fit the Vault-Tec assisted targeting system. Sure, I could shoot a guy in the legs and run and gun, but in V.A.T.S, you have a certain amount of action points. So it allows you to actually make a measured, precise shot on the legs, cripple him, so he'll move slower, take out the arms, he'll be less accurate with the gun, the head has a higher chance to critical.
I did see somebody on Twitter, they were upset that it didn't look like there was V.A.T.S in Starfield. I'm not upset about that, also just because narratively it doesn't really make sense for V.A.T.S to be in Starfield. But I do get the sentiment where it's like, it feels like a lot of the things that we came to know and love about Fallout are just missing. And even like standard systems like the cinematic kill camera and stuff like that being missing does feel a little strange. And then the lackluster gore. For those of you who missed the stream, somebody said, oh, there is blood in the game. You can see when you shoot people, if you slow it down, you can see that blood does come out of like the bullet holes when you shoot people in the game, to be clear, in the game. And so we looked it up, we went frame by frame, and there is a little bit of blood spatter, like when you shoot a target. If the bullet hits here, there'll be a little, we counted it, it's about 4 frames. 4 frames where you'll see a little effect, like a little spatter. But the spatter doesn't land on the floor. It doesn't interact with anything as far as we saw. There were blood stains on the floor from before the combat began. And so I think they did that to make it look like the blood was from the character. I don't know. It was weird. But if you rewound it and went frame by frame, you could see the blood was already on the floor. So there's just weird things missing from Starfield, and it could still be great. Obviously, I can have a ton of fun with Star Citizen, and it's missing a lot of important features and polishing and refinement, but it's still still pretty good. So it's not to say that the game's going to be bad because that stuff is missing, but it is to say that it's concerning when the game's already running at 30 Todd talks in interviews about having to remove things from the game to hit performance targets, and the performance target, as far as we can tell, is 30 frames. And even then, it doesn't run that well, from what we can tell. There's pop-in, all sorts of other issues. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm guessing that there's a lot of... I'm guessing there's going to be some performance issues when the game launches. There's just no way that launch is polished and refined. Like, Bethesda literally has never released a polished game. Never. And I don't think that they'll magically start now. They might surprise me, but I see no reason to believe that. I see no reason. If Todd said, like, oh, the game's been basically done for a year and we're just polishing the ever-living crap out of it, I'd be like, okay, nice. Love that, Todd. But he hasn't said that because that's not true.
So it might blow up, but it's hard to hit. So really taking all the stuff from Fallout 1 and 2 and sort of trying to bring that into a new next-gen type of game.
That was one of our goals initially, was we didn't want to just be a shooter. That the kind of stuff we do, we want to try something that attaches you to your character, that lets you have your character on the screen do something you, the player, can't do. That your character can go in and in V.A.T.S, blow the leg off one guy, the head off another, and the arm off another in some Equilibrium style, pop, 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 that you, unless you were like Call of Duty Ninja Master, you could never do as a player. It's like we want you to feel super powerful in those moments because your character in the world is super powerful, even though you were born with an extra big left thumb or something.
Todd's fond of saying that great games are played, not made, and that's certainly true because we knew what we wanted to do with it. We knew we wanted to have the ability to queue up shots at somebody on specific parts of their bodies and then play that back in a cinematic fashion. And that's
okay. Real quick, we're gonna attach the walls to the ship. A bunch of wrappers. Okay. First things first is gonna be this one. And I can't really see, but I think it should basically go like this. Click, click, click. Nice. Then the other side. Click it into place. One last bag, and then we're done with this third of the thing. Oh, Juicehead says Bethesda just announced yet another new event.